The day was bright, the sky adorned in a blanket of endless blue, and the village of Os lay buzzing with excitement. Today was the day that Adanna, the most beautiful maiden in all the land, would marry Chika, the son of the village chief. The sun glistened over her dark, flawless skin, and her eyes sparkled like the stars of the night sky. Every young man in the village had once dreamed of making Adanna his wife, but it was Chika who had won her heart. Their love was whispered about in every household and celebrated by all. But something felt strange that morning. Adanna stood in front of her family's hut, wrapped in the finest fabric the land had to offer, beads in her hair, her face adorned with the traditional markings of a bride. Yet, as the morning breeze brushed against her skin, an uneasy chill crawled up her spine. There was a silence hidden beneath the laughter and music, a silence that only she seemed to notice. As she made her way to the ceremonial grounds, the elders had gathered, drumming and singing praises to the ancestors, calling on them to bless this union. The air was filled with the sweet smell of incense and fresh palm wine. The villagers clapped and danced, but Adanna's heart felt heavy, as though an invisible weight had settled upon it. Suddenly, an old woman, her face hidden beneath a worn-out hood, appeared out of nowhere. Her back was hunched with age, her steps slow but deliberate. She hobbled toward Adanna, her gnarled hand stretched out, pointing directly at her. "Do not marry him," the old woman croaked, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "There is a curse upon this union." The villagers gasped, the music halted, and all eyes turned to the mysterious woman. Chika rushed to Adanna's side, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Who are you, and what nonsense do you speak?" he demanded. The old woman's eyes gleamed with a dark knowledge as she shook her head. "The curse is upon her, upon him. If they marry, doom will fall upon this land." The elders exchanged uneasy glances, but Chief Okiki, Chika's father, stepped forward and spoke with a voice full of authority. "We will not allow a madwoman to ruin this day. Away with her." But before anyone could stop her, the old woman vanished, as though she had never been there. The drums started again, and the wedding continued, though a strange unease hung in the air. The ceremony had gone on as planned, but the strange warning of the old woman echoed in Adanna's mind. Still, she smiled and danced with her husband, trying to push aside the fear. After all, no one else seemed to believe the woman. Why should she? The feast was grander than anything Os had ever seen. Palm wine flowed freely, and the smell of roasted yam and spiced goat filled the air. The young girls of the village performed a traditional dance in honor of the couple, their feet stomping rhythmically on the dusty earth, their colorful skirts twirling with every movement. Chika, proud and full of joy, held Adanna's hand as they sat on the raised platform, the place of honor reserved for the bride and groom. He leaned close and whispered, "Do not worry, my love. It was only the ravings of a madwoman. Nothing will come between us." Adanna nodded, but deep inside, a tiny voice whispered back, what if the old woman was right? What if there was something more to her words? As night fell and the moon cast its silver light over the village, Adanna tried to shake off her lingering fear. It was her wedding night after all. She should be happy. Suddenly, a loud, ear-piercing cry erupted from the darkness. The villagers froze, their laughter dying instantly. Then came another cry, this one closer, more desperate. It was a sound like no one had ever heard before, not even the oldest of the elders. The animals in the village began to stir. Goats bleated nervously, and dogs barked furiously at the shadows. Chief Okiki rose to his feet, his face dark with worry. "What is this?" Before anyone could answer, a gust of wind swept through the village, extinguishing the fires and sending a shiver down every spine. The ground beneath them trembled, just for a moment. and then all was still. Adanna clutched Chika's arm. "Something is wrong," she whispered. Chika's face was hard with determination. "I will not let anything harm you. You are my wife, and nothing will change that." But as they spoke, from the shadows emerged a figure. It was the old woman from the morning, her face still hidden under her hood. She stood at the edge of the village square, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "The curse has begun," she whispered, though her voice carried across the entire village. "You were warned." The village of Os awoke to chaos the next morning. Chickens lay lifeless in their coops, their feathers scattered like fallen leaves. Crops that had been lush and green the day before were now wilted, their once vibrant leaves brown and brittle. The river that ran through the village, providing water to all, had turned murky, its clear flow replaced by a thick black liquid that stank of death. The elders gathered quickly, their faces etched with concern. Adanna and Chika were summoned to the village square, where the people had already gathered, their eyes wide with fear. "Chief Okiki," one of the elders began, "this is no coincidence. The woman from yesterday, her words ring true." Adanna stood beside her husband, her heart pounding in her chest. Was this truly because of her? Was there really a curse upon their union? Chief Okiki, who had always been strong and sure of himself, now looked uncertain. He glanced at his son, and then at the villagers. "This is not the work of some curse," he said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We will find a way to fix this. We must." But the villagers weren't convinced. Murmurs began to spread like wildfire. "It is the bride," someone shouted. "She has brought this upon us." "No," Chika protested, stepping forward. "This is not her doing. You will not blame my wife for this." But the voices of dissent grew louder. Fear had taken root in the hearts of the people, and it was quickly turning into anger. Adanna felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. What had she done? How could she have brought such misery to the people she loved? Suddenly, from the crowd, a familiar voice rose. It was the old woman, her form barely visible among the villagers. "The curse has begun," she repeated, her voice cold, "and it will not end until the bride fulfills her destiny." The crowd parted as the old woman stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Adanna. "There is only one way to break the curse," she said softly, "but the cost is great." A chilling silence fell over the village square as the old woman's words echoed in the air. Adanna's heart beat wildly in her chest, her mind racing with confusion and fear. Fulfill her destiny? What could that mean? Chika stood tall beside her, but even his strength seemed to waver under the weight of the moment. He turned to the old woman, his eyes filled with anger. "What is this destiny you speak of? What must Adanna do to break this curse?" The old woman's eyes were dark and knowing, as though she could see far beyond the present moment, as though she had already witnessed the future. She sighed deeply before speaking again. "The curse is not new," she began, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "It is old, older than this village, older than your ancestors." The villagers leaned in closer, hanging on her every word. This curse was placed upon Adanna's bloodline long ago by a powerful spirit, angry at a great betrayal. Every woman born into her family is destined to suffer, and now the curse has awakened once more. Adanna's legs felt weak. "What betrayal?" she whispered. "What did my family do?" The old woman raised a finger to the sky. "It was your great-great-grandmother, Oluchi. She promised herself to the river spirit, Agbala, but on the day of their union, she fled. She chose a mortal love over her sacred vow, and in doing so, angered Agbala. In his rage, he cursed her and all her descendants. Now, every daughter in your line is bound to suffer until one fulfills the promise." Adanna's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. What promise?" The old woman's face softened, but her words were harsh. You must go to the river and offer yourself to Agbala, as Oluchi was meant to do. Only then will the curse be lifted. Only then will your people be freed. The villagers gasped in horror. Offer herself to the river spirit? That could only mean one thing: sacrifice. No! Chika's voice was strong and firm, louder than the whispers and cries of the crowd. I will not let you sacrifice my wife. There must be another way. But the old woman shook her head. There is no other way. The curse will destroy everything if she does not go. The river, the crops, the animals, even the lives of the villagers will be claimed. Adanna's heart was torn in two. She looked at Chika, her beloved husband, and then at the people of her village. They had always been kind to her, always loved her. How could she allow them to suffer because of a promise made generations ago? She felt the weight of her ancestors pressing down on her, the burden of a choice she had never made. I will do it, Adanna said softly, her voice trembling. I will go to the river. The crowd gasped again, and Chika grabbed her arm. No, Adanna, you can't. I won't let you. Tears rolled down Adanna's cheeks, but she stood firm. I must. This curse. It's my burden to bear. I cannot let our people die because of me. The old woman nodded slowly. You are brave, child, but be warned. Once you enter the river, there is no coming back. The decision had been made. The elders gathered quickly to plan the journey to the sacred river, the home of the spirit Agbala. Adanna stood quietly as they spoke, her heart heavy with dread. The villagers, though saddened by her fate, looked at her with a mixture of admiration and pity. She had chosen to save them, even at the cost of her life. Chika refused to leave her side. His love for her was fierce, and the thought of losing her tore at his very soul. I will go with you, he said, his voice unwavering. If you must go to the river, then I will go too. Adanna shook her head. You can't, Chika. This is my destiny, not yours. But Chika's eyes were filled with determination. You are my wife, Adanna. I will not abandon you. The old woman had already begun preparing for the journey, gathering sacred herbs and offering items for the river spirit. He may accompany you, she said quietly, but he cannot enter the river. Only you may go before Agbala. And so the journey began. They set out at dawn, the sky a deep indigo as the sun slowly began to rise. The path to the river was long and treacherous, winding through thick forests and over jagged hills. The sound of drums and chants filled the air as the villagers followed them part way, singing songs to honor Adanna's bravery. As they walked, Chika held Adanna's hand tightly. Neither spoke, but their hearts were full of unspoken words. The weight of their journey pressed heavily upon them, the knowledge that this might be their last moments together gnawing at their souls. The old woman led the way, her steps sure despite her age. She knew the path well, having guided others to their fate long before Adanna's time. By midday, they reached the edge of the sacred forest, the place where the river spirit's domain began. The trees here were ancient, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches forming a canopy so dense that only slivers of sunlight reached the ground. The air was thick with moisture and the sound of the river could be heard in the distance, its steady flow like a heartbeat in the silence. We are close, the old woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Prepare yourself, child. The river awaits. Adanna's heart raced as she looked around the dark, ancient forest. She could feel the presence of something watching them, something old and powerful. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and a cold chill ran down her spine. Chika squeezed her hand. You are not alone, he whispered. I am with you. But deep inside, Adanna knew that this was something she had to face alone. The curse was hers, the burden of her ancestors hers to carry. The old woman stopped at the edge of the riverbank, where the water flowed dark and ominous. "This is where it ends," she said, her voice filled with finality. "When you enter the water, Agbala will come. Be strong, child." Adanna took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the dark, swirling waters. This was it. Her fate, her family's curse. Everything had led her to this moment. She turned to Chika one last time, her heart breaking. "I love you," she whispered. "And I will love you forever," Chika replied, his voice thick with emotion. With that, Adanna stepped toward the river. As Adanna stepped into the cold, dark water, a strange feeling came over her. It was as though the river recognized her, as if it knew her soul. The water lapped at her ankles, then her knees, and soon it was up to her waist. The further she walked, the deeper the river became, and the more her fear grew. She could feel eyes watching her from beneath the surface, unseen forces swirling around her, tugging at her spirit. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Suddenly, the water began to bubble, and a great wind swept across the river. The trees surrounding them swayed violently, their branches creaking and groaning under the force of the gust. From the depths of the river rose a figure, towering and made entirely of water, its form shifting and swirling like the current. This was Agbala, the river spirit, and his presence was terrifying. The spirit's voice boomed, echoing across the land. "Who dares disturb my peace?" Adanna, trembling but determined, spoke up. "It is I, Adanna, the descendant of Oluchi. I have come to fulfill the promise my ancestor broke." The river spirit's eyes glowed an eerie blue as he stared at her. "Oluchi's betrayal cost me greatly. Why should I accept you as her redemption?" Adanna's voice wavered, but she stood firm. "I come willingly to offer myself to you. I ask only that you lift the curse on my family and spare my people." Agbala's laughter was deep and cold. "You think your sacrifice will appease me?" Before Adanna could answer, the spirit reached out a hand, pulling her deeper into the river. Adanna gasped as the water pulled her deeper, the cold biting at her skin. Agbala's watery hand encircled her waist, dragging her toward the center of the river. She struggled to stay above the surface, but the river's current was too strong. The world around her blurred as she was submerged, her breath stolen by the icy waters. Suddenly, everything became still. Adanna opened her eyes and found herself standing on solid ground. The river was gone, replaced by an otherworldly realm, a vast, open expanse where the sky glowed a deep shade of purple and the ground shimmered like glass. In the distance, tall trees with silver leaves swayed gently in a breeze that she could not feel. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the only sound was the faint rustle of leaves. Standing before her was Agbala, no longer a shifting form of water, but a tall, majestic figure with dark, glistening skin and eyes that shone like molten gold. His voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the strange realm. "You think yourself brave, child," Agbala said, his gaze piercing through her, "but bravery alone will not earn my mercy. If you wish to free your people and lift the curse from your bloodline, you must first prove your worth." Adanna's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to stay strong. Agbala raised a hand, and before them appeared 3 paths. Each path was covered in thick mist, and their ends were hidden from view. "There are 3 tests you must face," the spirit said, his voice like thunder. "Each will challenge your heart, your courage, and your loyalty. Only if you pass all 3 will I consider lifting the curse." Adanna swallowed hard and nodded. She had no choice but to accept. For the sake of her people, for the sake of her family, She had to prove herself. Agbala motioned toward the first path. Your first test is the test of the heart. On this path, you will be faced with a choice that will reveal the truth within you. Without hesitation, Adanna stepped forward, her bare feet touching the cool, mist-covered ground. The mist parted as she walked, revealing a small, grassy field with a single tree in the center. Underneath the tree sat an old woman, her mother. Adanna, her mother called softly, her voice warm and gentle. Come, my child. Tears sprang to Adanna's eyes. Her mother had passed away many years ago, taken by illness. But here she was, looking just as she had in life, kind, loving, with a soft smile on her lips. Adanna rushed forward, her heart aching with longing. She fell to her knees beside her mother, wrapping her arms around her. Mama, I've missed you so much. Her mother stroked her hair, just as she had done when Adanna was a child. I know, my dear. I've watched over you every day. Adanna looked up at her, her heart swelling with love. But something was wrong. She could feel it deep inside. How are you here? She asked, her voice trembling. You left us. Her mother smiled sadly. Yes, I left. But I can come back. If you choose to stay here with me, we can be together again. You won't have to face the curse. You won't have to sacrifice anything. You can stay here, and we'll be happy, just like before. Adanna's heart twisted. How she longed to stay, to be with her mother again, to forget about the curse and the burden that had been placed on her. But deep inside, she knew this was a test. This wasn't real. This wasn't her true path. With tears streaming down her face, Adanna shook her head. I love you, Mama, but I can't stay. I have to go back. My people are counting on me. Her mother's face darkened, and the warm light in her eyes faded. You would leave me again? After everything we've been through? Adanna stood, though her legs trembled beneath her. I must, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, Mama. I have to go. As soon as the words left her mouth, her mother's figure faded into mist, and the grassy field vanished. Adanna was once again standing before Agbala, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. You have passed the test of the heart, the spirit said, his voice filled with approval. You chose duty over comfort, but your trials are far from over. Adanna wiped her tears, her hands shaking. She had passed the first test, but the pain of leaving her mother behind weighed heavily on her heart. She didn't know if she had the strength to face what was next, but she had no choice. Agbala pointed to the second path. Now you will face the test of courage. Adanna walked down the second path, her heart still aching from the first test. The mist swirled around her ankles, growing thicker with each step. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread settled over her. She had no idea what awaited her, but she steeled herself, determined to face whatever was to come. As she continued, the mist parted, revealing a vast open plain. In the center of the plain stood a large stone structure, an ancient, crumbling tower that seemed to reach for the heavens. It was dark and foreboding, with vines creeping up its sides, and at the very top, something glowed faintly. Adanna felt a deep sense of fear rise within her as she approached the tower. The air around it was thick with a sense of danger, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. Yet, she knew this was part of the test. She had to enter. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the entrance, her hands trembling. The inside of the tower was dark and cold, the air thick with dust. As she walked further in, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and she suddenly found herself at the base of a narrow, spiraling staircase. At the top of the stairs, she could see the faint glow, but between her and the light stood an enormous creature, a beast with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs. Its body was covered in dark fur, and it stood on two legs, towering over her. The creature growled low, the sound vibrating through the walls of the tower. Fear gripped Adanna's heart. The creature was massive, far stronger than her, and its glowing eyes seemed to pierce straight through her. She felt frozen in place, her body trembling uncontrollably. How could she face something so powerful? How could she, a mere human, hope to survive? But then she remembered why she was here. This was the test of courage. She had to face her fears if she wanted to break the curse. She couldn't run away, not now. Her people, her family, and Chika were depending on her. Summoning every ounce of bravery she could muster, Adanna stepped forward. The creature growled louder, baring its sharp teeth, but she didn't stop. She continued to move toward the stairs, her legs shaking, but her resolve strong. "I am not afraid," she whispered, though her heart still pounded in her chest. "I will not be afraid." The beast lunged at her, but instead of running, Adanna stood her ground. She closed her eyes, waiting for the attack. But nothing happened. When she opened her eyes, the creature was gone. The tower was silent, and the path before her was clear. She had passed the test of courage. As she climbed the stairs, she felt a sense of pride wash over her. She had faced her fear, and she had survived. But she knew the hardest test was still to come. At the top of the tower, she found a glowing orb, pulsing with light. As she touched it, the tower faded away, and she found herself standing once again before Agbala. "You have passed the test of courage," Agbala said, his voice filled with approval. "But the final test will be the hardest of all." Adanna nodded, though her heart raced with fear. She was ready. Agbala pointed to the third and final path. "Now, you must face the test of loyalty." The third and final path stretched out before Adanna, shrouded in mist and mystery. She had faced the depths of her heart and conquered her fears, but now, as she stepped onto the last path, she felt an overwhelming sense of unease. The test of loyalty would be the most challenging of all. The mist parted, revealing a familiar sight, the village. But something was wrong. The once thriving place was now in ruins. Huts were crumbling, crops were withered and dry, and the village square, usually full of life, was empty. Adanna's heart sank at the sight. What had happened? As she walked further into the village, she saw a group of people huddled together. Among them were the faces she recognized, her friends, the elders, and even Chika. They all looked pale and weak, their clothes tattered, their eyes filled with fear. They looked at Adanna with desperation. "Adanna!" one of the elders called out, his voice hoarse. "You've returned. Please save us." Adanna rushed forward, her heart pounding. "What happened here? What is going on?" One of the women in the crowd spoke, her voice trembling. "The curse, Adanna. The curse has taken everything. The crops have died, the river has dried up, and people are sick. We need you to finish the journey. You must end this." Adanna nodded, her resolve strong. "I'm trying. I've faced 2 tests, and now I must complete the final one." But as she spoke, Chika stepped forward, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Adanna," he whispered, "you don't have to do this." Adanna's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Chika took her hands in his. "We can leave. We can go far away from this village, far away from the curse. We don't need to stay. We can start a new life together, somewhere the curse won't follow us." Adanna stared at him in disbelief. "But what about the village? What about our people? I can't just leave them." Chika's grip tightened. "You don't have to sacrifice yourself for them. You've already done enough. Let's go, Adanna. Let's leave this place behind." Adanna felt her heart torn in two. She loved Chika more than anything in the world. The thought of leaving with him, of escaping the curse, and living a life together was tempting. But she knew the truth. If she left, the village would be lost. The people she had grown up with, the people who had loved and cared for her, would suffer. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Chika. "I can't leave," she whispered. "I have to finish what I started." Chika's face twisted with pain. "But Adanna, I need you. I can't lose you." Adanna's heart ached, but she knew what she had to do. She gently pulled her hands away from his. "I'm sorry, Chika. I love you, but I have to do this." As soon as the words left her mouth, the village and the people disappeared. She was once again standing before Agbala. "You have passed the test of loyalty," Agbala said, his voice filled with reverence. "You have proven that your heart is true, your courage unwavering, and your loyalty steadfast. You are worthy." Adanna's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. She had passed all 3 tests. But what would come next? Adanna stood before Agbala, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She had faced the tests of heart, courage, and loyalty. And now she waited for the river spirit's final judgment. The strange, otherworldly realm around them was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Agbala regarded her for a long moment, his glowing eyes unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke. "You have proven yourself worthy," the spirit said, his voice deep and powerful. "You have shown that you are willing to sacrifice for others, that you are brave in the face of danger, and that your loyalty to your people is unshakable." Adanna's heart swelled with relief, but she remained still, waiting for the spirit's next words. Agbala raised a hand, and the air around them shimmered with magic. "The curse that was placed upon your bloodline by my hand has weighed heavily on your people for generations. But you, Adanna, have broken the chain. The curse is lifted." Tears of joy filled Adanna's eyes, and she fell to her knees, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for sparing my people." Agbala's expression softened, and the spirit seemed almost human for a moment. "You have earned this, child. But remember, great power requires great responsibility. Your actions have not only saved your village, but have restored balance to the world." As the spirit spoke, the world around them began to change. The purple sky turned to blue, and the shimmering ground became soft green grass. The scent of rain was replaced by the fresh smell of earth and trees. Adanna stood, her heart filled with awe as she realized she was back at the river's edge, where her journey had begun. Chika was waiting for her, his face filled with disbelief and joy. "Adanna!" he cried, running to her and pulling her into his arms. Adanna hugged him tightly, her heart overflowing with love and relief. "It's over," she whispered. "The curse is lifted." The villagers gathered around them, their faces full of hope and gratitude. The once dry river began to flow again, its waters clear and pure. The crops, which had withered in the fields, began to sprout new life. The village was saved. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the land, Adanna and Chika stood hand in hand, watching the rebirth of their home. The curse was gone, but the lessons learned would stay with them forever. The story of Adanna, the cursed bride, teaches the importance of sacrifice, courage, and loyalty. Through her journey, she showed that true strength comes from the heart, and that one's duty to others can break even the darkest of curses.